Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the balance sheet. You got Billy and Raj here, ready to talk about the goings on in women's wrestling again this week. We've got a lot to cover. Some good movement in the WWE side, and on the AEW side, also some seeds planted for some future rivalries, plus a big pay-per-view match that occurred last night. But what we really want to focus on today, we promised last week, this AEW TV deal. It's a great thing for wrestling. I think it's a great thing for women's wrestling. And as the resident expert here, Raj is going to break down exactly what this deal means for wrestling and speak the truth to it too, because there's a lot of tribalism out there about, whether it was a good deal or a bad deal. But we're just going to talk about what it means for AEW and most importantly, what it means for wrestlers and free agency. So, Raj, tell us about this big money deal that they got.
Okay, so when this TV contract came up, there was a lot of noise around it on, okay, if they get this much money, it's a failure. If they get this much money, it's a success. So let me set the two numbers up and then I'll talk about what actually they got. Originally, it was within industry circles that if they got $120 million a year for 4 years, so that would be about $480 million total, but they did not have to give up any of the pay-per-view revenue to Warner Brothers. So they're not splitting them. They're not giving them away on Max. 120 to 125 million would make AEW a profitable company. Now, for context, until this new TV deal was signed and until it kicks in 2025, AEW is not a profitable company. But that doesn't mean it is not a successful company, because there are many, many companies in the history of business that for the first 5 years didn't make money. And then in year six, it became a very profitable company. And they go on to be some of the most profitable companies we've ever seen. So people have to stop looking at it in such a narrow lens, like it's a failure because they're not making money. Because in the history of professional wrestling, only two national brands are going to turn out to be profitable in most of their history, which is WWE and now AEW. Because for all the success that WCW had, WCW only was profitable for 2 years. 1996 to 1998, they were profitable, and then they were never profitable after, and they were never profitable pre 1996. I think 1995 they might have made like $10, like total profit $10, and there was this whole joke about that. But so let's get into the numbers. If they got 155 million a year, but they had to give up their pay-per-views, that would be considered a success also. Because AEW, for all the criticism that we can have about the product or how cold they are a steady pay-per-view business. They always generate, 120 to 150,000 buys at, $50 a pop. Now, again, they split that with the cable companies, and by the time they get their share, I think it's 40% of the total revenue. But, people could do the math at home. $50, 150,000 buys, 40% of that. That's a good chunk of change that they're getting every year. And if you've noticed, AEW has ramped up its amount of pay-per-views it's doing. They used to do 4, then I think they went to 6, and now I think they do one a month.
Maybe one break in between, or it's tough to because you got all in and all out. I think there's somewhere, I don't know the answer, probably 10, maybe at least 10. It feels like at least 10.
So the old AEW TV deal was somewhere between 45 and 60 million a year, but they were giving up 5 hours of what they call original programming. And what that means is it doesn't include repeats. It doesn't include shows that debuted in September, like episode 10, and then they re-showed it in May. This is episodic TV. They're getting 52 weeks of 5 hours a week for a whole year. And for that, they were getting about 45 to 60 million, which is a really, really bad amount of money for that much original content. Like, that's why the show is not profitable, because Tony, who obviously has expertise in the TV business and, is one of the owners of the Jaguars, knows that you cannot be profitable making 60 million a year and giving up 5 hours of original programming, because that requires you to pay all those employees, all the production costs, the arena costs, and all that. So yeah, he's definitely he has the money, but he took huge hits to get this thing off the ground. So what the actual deal that was signed was 100, it's going to average 185 million over 3 years, guaranteed. So the 3 years is guaranteed $555 million over the 3 years, but it's an accelerator contract where year one is going to be less money that AEW gets than year three. So the 555 on average is going to be 185, but I don't know the actual numbers there, but let's say 170 is what year one is. That would mean maybe year three is 200, year two is in the middle of that. So 185 million is a great number for AEW, because remember, they're only now required to give up 4 hours of original programming a week, because effectively the Friday show, which is Rampage, is canceled, or it's being shopped around to another network provider, a Fox, maybe this new sports channel that ESPN, Fox are coming up with. So Tony got a 3x pay increase, giving up one less hour of original programming. And here's the key. He has a home now for his video library. His entire video library will be on Max. All of the original Dynamites, the Rampages, the Collisions, the pay-per-views, they're all going to be on Max. Also, he has signed the UFC model with HBO, which is, if anybody out there is an ESPN UFC fan, for anybody we're talking to who loves the UFC, they understand that if you have ESPN Plus, you get a discount on buying those UFC pay-per-views. This is the same setup that Tony got with Warner Brothers, which is, if you have a Max subscription, you're going to be able to buy the AEW pay-per-views at a discount, but you're still going to have to spend money on them. Warner Brothers is going to get a piece of the revenue. Tony is going to get a piece of the revenue. So he did not give up, which in my opinion is a steady cash cow in pay-per-views. So that's great, but also he's able to still allow the other cable companies, satellite companies, some streaming companies, I guess, to carry his pay-per-views. So he's going to be able to make revenue from the other providers that he does not have to share with Warner Brothers. Now, in the ESPN UFC model, it's an exclusive deal. And I'm going to tell everybody a little story about this. I was in a conference room at my old client's office in Arizona. This is one of the biggest cable companies in the world, in the country. And we're sitting at a table getting ready to market the next UFC pay-per-view, and which audiences we want to target, what discounts we want to give to certain folks who want to cancel, maybe incentivize them. We'll give you $10 off your next UFC pay-per-view. Do you want to stick around? And the news broke in the conference room while we were there on my phone that ESPN and UFC signed this exclusive deal, which took every other cable provider in the country off the table for having UFC. So I got the message on my phone, read it to, at the time, my client, and he goes, "Oh, but we're still going to get orders." I said, No. You're not reading this. You're out. They have effectively cut you out, and every other cable company in the country, they're an ESPN exclusive product, ESPN Plus. So what's worse for us is we're going to get so many phone calls, emails, text messages, chat about where's my UFC, but you don't have it anymore. So this cycle, you're going to get the angry customers, but next cycle, they're going to go to ESPN Plus. Tony set it up where he didn't just go to Warner Brothers. He's still allowing the other providers to carry it. So he's not cutting effectively some of his audience out because he knows, he has the numbers, I'm sure, that there are people in parts of the country that can't get streaming or can't get Max effectively. So they need their Direct TV, or they need their Dish Network, or they need their Cox, or their Xfinity, or their Warner Brothers, Time Warner Cable, or Spectrum, sorry. So I think it's a really, really good deal for AEW. It makes AEW now the second most profitable wrestling company of all time. Uh, Anybody who says that he should have got more, he could have got more, anybody who's comparing it to SmackDown or Raw, they just don't know what they're talking about, because you're talking about a company that has a 60-year head start. It's basically the Kleenex of this industry, WWE, right? They're Kleenex. Right. When you talk wrestling, everybody says WWE. Nobody says, oh, do you watch WWE? Oh, you mean that WWE thing? Like if you say, oh, I'm a fan of professional wrestling, you're like, oh, you mean WWE? You mean Hulk Hogan? You mean Steve Austin? You mean The Rock? Like nobody says, oh, AEW? You watch, like that's a hardcore thing. The other misnomer that's been out there is that AEW has this separate fan base and WWE has this fan base and they don't do this. No, that's not true at all. In the early days of AEW, there were a lot of upset, disgruntled WWE fans who wanted an alternative product. And some of them shifted over to AEW. And remember, when you look at the early numbers, WWE was coming here, AEW is doing this, and they were like close to doing this. And now it's back to this, right? But to say that AEW has its own unique audience that doesn't watch WWE, I don't believe that. I believe fans of professional wrestling check out both products. Maybe they watch all of WWE TV and watch AEW on YouTube or vice versa, but they know what's going on in each other's company. And getting back to the TV deal, this is great for the professional wrestlers who are going to win in the end because of this. Why? More money. Two very profitable professional wrestling companies that are making, if you combine all the TV deals, $1.5 billion, maybe almost closer to $2 billion in revenue. All that means is they have better options. So if you want to make, let's use Rhea Ripley. Not that this is going to happen, but Rhea Ripley is, everybody knows, if you look in the news, her contract is coming up or she's going to renew. So let's say Rhea Ripley did the Becky Lynch route and said, you know what, I'm going to let my contract run out at WWE, and then I'm going to be an active free agent. Well, she knows now AEW has deep pockets too, right? Like she knows, oh, well, I know what you paid Mercedes, and you just signed this TV deal that's even more lucrative. And I'm, by a lot of metrics, the number one women's wrestler in the world. If you look at merch sales, whatever, I want $10 million. They can't really effectively tell her they don't have the money now. It's out there. Both companies have very deep pockets, have a lot of money. And that's what's really good for professional wrestling. That when WCW got bought out by WWE, it was one of the best business deals of all time, because I think Vince got it for $3 million, and he got the videotape library and the trademarks and the copyrights and all that stuff. But the wrestlers then were signed to Warner, Time Warner. So like a Bill Goldberg, if you guys remember the invasion angle, there was no Bill Goldberg, there was no Sting, there was no Ric Flair, there was no Scott Steiner, because they were getting paid by Time Warner, and they had to effectively break that contract and then sign a WWE contract. They were making way more money with WCW than what WWE would pay them. So Goldberg, Scott Steiner did not. They said, I'll let my contract run out, then I'll come work for you. And that's what ended up happening. But what I'm saying about this TV deal is that this has effectively now proven that professional wrestling is always going to be a staple of television, streaming, cable TV, Netflix. It doesn't really matter. Professional wrestling while it does not get the lucrative advertising dollars that a basketball, an NBA, a tennis, even golf gets, because it's just not seen as an affluent fan base who's willing to spend money on a high-end product, which is actually false. And I have told people in advertising
Hugely
this,
false.
I've
Hugely
told people
false.
in advertising, like, take me specifically, and
Mm.
they're like, "Oh, well, you're the anomaly, you're not the norm." And I think, no, I am more the norm. Like, wrestling fans spend a lot of money on product. Like,
Meet and
and I
greets, the pay-per-view chairs. I mean, those things. It's insane what some of people we're friends with ourselves and people we
mhm.
communicate with. Um, you know, people put their money where their mouth is for their favorite wrestlers. It's that independent contractor thing too, where you feel like you're support. Like I don't feel like I'm directly supporting Cade Cunningham being a Pistons fan. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like I'm a Pistons fan, but we all believe that we're, well, we got to support Mercedes, we got to support Willow, and I think that that's something in wrestling fandom that actually pulls more dollars out of our pockets than if it were just WWE and AEW, right? We care about the wrestlers, and we know that they do better based on our dollars going towards their merch, their segments, their meet and greets, and whatever.
So you have a very nice poster in the background of the Mercedes Bailey match, which, in my opinion, is still the best women's match of all time, and to me, the most influential, at least from North American standpoint. But I look at both of them. Like, if they were to tomorrow advertise for um Adidas, right? Like, they're doing an Adidas tracksuit workout line, and they're both in the commercial. I truly believe whatever the product is that's attached to both of them would sell out instantly from just from wrestling fans who are
Yep.
huge supporters of both of them and are like, oh, Mercedes has their own tracksuit. Bailey has their own tracksuit. I'm going to go buy it. And they would sell it instantly. Like Roman Reigns, for those of you who don't know, has a Jordan deal, right? He is going to be, I guess, the first professional wrestler that has like an endorsement deal with a major shoe company in terms of branding and signature sneakers. That's going to sell out. It's probably going to do better numbers than a LeBron sneaker or a Devin Booker sneaker, because wrestling fans are very monolithic in one sense. They support wrestlers because they want wrestlers, like, they feel like it's like their duty, like, oh, Roman Reigns has a
Yep.
sneaker, I'm gonna go buy it. And I have sat in advertising meetings and I have told them this. I've said, like, why do you all think wrestling fans don't have money? Have you ever looked at WrestleMania ticket prices? You think they're getting those for free? Like I said, wrestling fans spend thousands of dollars on wrestling. I point out he's a very prominent rapper in West Side Gun. He goes to every event. He's ringside. He spends $50,000 on those ringside seats. He flies in on his plane to see all these wrestling events. And he's just one of many celebrities now that you see at all these shows. Now, yeah, WWE is really hot right now. It's cool. I get all that. But even in what's called the not so hot WWE period, you still always saw very high ticket prices, and people paid still for WrestleMania ticket prices. They still came from all over the world to this event. So I feel like this TV deal just illustrates that Warner Brothers knew that this is a product that is always going to generate a decent rating for them. It's always going to be number one or two or top five in the coveted demo. And for those of you who don't understand and think $185 million is a lot of money, it is in context for just the average person. But in the TV business, it costs television networks more money a year to produce an original TV show that is episodic for 26 episodes, 20 episodes, because actors, if you don't know this, make a lot more money than wrestlers.
Yeah.
Right. If you know this.
Yeah, no, I think you covered it perfectly. One of the reasons why we like doing this is because wrestling's not so serious that there should be misinformation in wrestling, right?
Yes.
It's pretty straightforward. But I just want to walk everyone through the math real quick, right? $120 million deal without the pay-per-views, success. $150 million deal with the pay-per-views, success. 120,000 buys per pay-per-view, times $50, $6 million. Times 40% is $2.4 million, give or take, right? So call it $2.5 million per pay-per-view. Let's say they're running 10 to 12 pay-per-views a year. That's 25 to 30 plus million dollars. They have had a couple of pay-per-views in the 150, 160 range. So obviously that number could go up. They've had a couple in the 100 range. So there's some flexibility there. So we're using the average of 120, 125. That's $30 million worth of revenue after they're cut on pay-per-views. So 120 to 150, the math all checks out. So knowing that, and knowing that they got an average of 185 and didn't give up the pay-per-views. Now, that already gives them a surplus of $60 million over what that low bar number was, the 120. Or no, actually a $90 million surplus, sorry. 120. It's up to 180 now, so that's 185, 65 million, and then another $25 million on their pay-per-views. Now they will probably sell those, I think, at some point, or they could. And then the other thing is 80% of the weekly television compared to before. They cut an hour out of the 5 that they can now go sell to a Fox or whoever for another, it'll be tens of millions of dollars, right? So Tony cut an absolutely fantastic deal. There's no way to spin this as anything less than a big success for the wrestling industry. And think about anyone who's telling you that this is not a success. Think about who they are. They're either ran a company that was not successful over the long term and did not make money, or they're affiliated to WWE and don't want to, overstate this impact on the business. But it is a win-win-win. If you don't know my background, I literally have only watched WWE for, 38 years. Okay. I kept up with other federations and, wrestling companies, but I was a WWE guy. I was a WWE guy when it was Bret Hart. You know what I'm saying? Like when everyone went to WCW with Hulk Hogan and Macho Man, and I was still a WWE guy. So fast forward to my favorite wrestler, who I support, Mercedes Moné, is in AEW. And so I've been watching AEW weekly, since she's been in it, instead of just kind of paying attention to pay-per-views and whatnot. So expanding the fandom is a good thing. I've got no reason to be tribalistic one way or the other. I still, have a ton of WWE stuff that I spent money on over the years, and now my favorite wrestlers in AEW. I watch them both and report on them both to you guys here. Everyone just needs to clap and appreciate what this does for the wrestlers. I think that's the most important thing. I don't care at this point in my life. I'm not an AEW guy. I'm not a WWE guy. I care about the wrestlers. And Raj nailed it. If your contract is coming up now for the next 3 years, maybe longer, because they do have the 4th year option, you have true negotiating power where WWE knows that AEW has the money and the TV time that they can guarantee a spot for wrestlers who are free agents. And the TV time part of it is a big deal. They're not going anywhere. These are locked in over the long term. So if you're a free agent this year, it's big news. Rhea Ripley just signed an extension. She got more money because of AEW. She got more money because Mercedes went to AEW and broke that seal on the women's side, at least, and really on the women's side, a top talent was willing to go over. A couple of the men who are Mania main eventers had gone over in the past, but I would also argue that Adam Copeland and Bryan Danielson, it's a little bit different because they're in the I can do whatever I want time of their career. I'm so made that I can just make decisions to have fun. And yes, I'm going to get paid, but I can chase my side quests or just, feel like wrestling this set of people and it doesn't matter. But Mercedes went over during her prime, so that was a big deal. And Rhea made more money because of it. And Becky will make more money because of it. Natalia made more money because of it. Mariah May and Mercedes, their next deals are going to be worth more because of it. So it's a good thing for wrestlers. It's a good thing for us as fans. There's no reason to have any toxicity about it. They're actually really not competing now for the next 2+ years. If you think about it, there's nothing to compete over except for the wrestlers. AEW's locked in. WWE's locked in. Yes, the ratings matter, but there's no deal to be signed for the next several years. So I hope that they tell stories around just growing their brand and making their shows better instead of worrying about the week to week.
So there are two things that I want to wrap this topic up and cover. Number one, everybody talks about the 3 years plus the additional year. That technically, Warner Brothers could say at the end of 3 years, oh, we want to cancel, you're off the air. They could do that, right? Here's why they won't do that. Because as the television landscape erodes in terms of where viewership gets splintered across multiple platforms and all this stuff, I think you're going to see a shift in the next 3 years of it all coming back, where instead of having 30 options like we do today, we might get to a place of having 5 options in 3 years, where these are all bundled and part of some streaming hub. Professional wrestling has always been core programming for the Warner Brothers lineage. If you go back and look at Legacy TBS, you look at Legacy TNT, wrestling has always been a big part of that company's prominence to get more viewership. What people don't remember about old TBS is Saturday night would lead into the Braves games. Yep. So they would have that audience. People are like, oh, well, their attendance is really, really down and their ratings are down. Those two things are true. The attendance is really bad in a lot of AEW TV tapings, etc. But Tony now has enough money coming in and he's profitable where tomorrow, you know what Tony could do effectively? He could just run AEW TV out of Daly's place, get the same 700, 800,000 people a week, and cut all his costs from being a traveling kind of road show and still generate 800,000 viewers and make himself even more profitable, building back the fan demand for coming into your city. So like, let's say he takes a year off of touring. They do shows at a daily place, except for pay-per-views. Then they go to a city. Then in a year, people will be clamoring to see the AEW stars again in their city. I think they do too much shows now. I think they should cut back on how many shows they do and tape out of Daly's place, because I actually really liked that setup during the pandemic, and then make the demand there. And also, I think, Tony, you've made a great point. With the money now coming in, he can focus on just growing his own product and not worrying about trying to get every single dollar to be, solvent. He doesn't need to do that now. Number two, there is a wrestling company that should be criticized for their TV deal, but it's not AEW. It should be WWE. They are getting $20 million a year from the CW for NXT. $20 million. NXT, for people who care about ratings, is blowing the doors off of AEW right now in ratings. Right. NXT is doing over 800,000. AEW is doing 700. They're doing it on a Tuesday night on the CW. which is not historically a wrestling channel. It hasn't been for a long time. If you're WWE now, you probably feel like you got fleeced because CW probably has the best television. They got the best deal maybe in all of television right now. That they're getting one of the hot wrestling brands. If you take NXT and you call it its own brand in the WWE umbrella, they're getting hot product for $20 million a year. And the way WWE does things now in the Shawn Michaels Triple H era, Roman Reigns might show up on the CW now.
Right.
Cody Rhodes will show up. CM Punk has been on. Randy Orton is on.
Orton.
But then the women are on fire in that company. And the hottest free agents of the last, 2 years from the women perspective, other than Mercedes, Julia, Stephanie, they both show up on CW, right? One week it's Julia's title match. The next week Stephanie shows up. And it's like, wow, I'm getting all this for 20 million. So you can criticize one company for maybe not even having the own confidence they have in their own product, which is NXT, like AEW, was always a loss leader. It lost money for WWE, but they needed it as a path for developmental. So they're like, oh, we're not making any money. CW's giving us 20 million. Let's take the deal. If they know now what they knew, if they knew back then what they knew now, about how much ratings this would generate, they would get a deal close to AEW. Like they would get 150 million a year for 2 hours. Yeah.
It's great. I know it's going to be one less hour of programming, or I presume it's going to be, but can't you argue that AEW is going to get more than $20 million for whoever they sell the Friday night show to?
I do. Yeah, I think they'll probably get, let me see. I think they're probably going to get 75 million a year. That's going to be my guess.
And how crazy will that look on WWE? Because they basically gave it away for an 800,000 viewers a week for 52 weeks of fresh programming. If it's going to do 800, I mean, they're basically giving it away. I do wonder if they do, Fox has been thrown out there. Obviously, they don't have SmackDown anymore. Similar to CW, more households have Fox than have PBS and TNT. So, do you sell the Friday show and it ends up getting the viewership in a way that it almost needs to be your flagship, but you can't really go back on TBS like that, but it could put them in a tough predicament only because the ratings have been so tough on the Dynamite side. And the other part of it is, you go back to our very first episode, we've been talking about this since minute 7 of the first episode. Fox loves them some Mercedes Moné, Sasha Banks. So she's been working Rampages, man. I absolutely would expect her to be working a Fox show if they get it. I'm sure that that's part of the package if they can sign that deal.
She's a familiar face to a Fox TV audience.
Yep.
Right? For 5 years, Fox had WWE, 2019 to 2024. She was as prominent a person on that television show other than Roman Reigns.
Yep.
Right? For the first 3 years of that show, a lot of advertising, marketing dollars was spent on promoting her as the woman's face of SmackDown and Roman Reigns as the male face of SmackDown. Again, I referenced this in our first episode, Pizza Hut commercial with Joe Buck, with Troy Aikman, with Jimmy Johnson, with Mike Pereira. It was Pizza Hut. It was Super Bowl. It was Roman Reigns. It was Sasha Banks. It was not Charlotte Flair. It was not Becky Lynch. It was not, I guess at the time, John Cena. I don't know. I don't remember who was in WWE male-wise at the time at the top. I think it was Reigns and probably Cena. Maybe was Cena around? I don't know. But it was Reigns and Sasha that, remember, that was a Fox Pizza Hut
Brock Lesnar
deal.
would have been, I guess.
Brock Lesnar. It was not a WWE is paying Roman Reigns and Sasha Banks and picked them. In fact, if WWE had their choice, they wouldn't have picked Sasha Banks. I think we know that now. That would have been Charlotte Flair. That would have been Becky Lynch. So Yeah, I think with Tony taking that 1 hour, like with Warner Brothers saying, the Friday show does nothing for us, take it. And then he has that hour and he can go to Fox and say, look, I got this person on my roster that, well, one, come January, the WWE audience is only going to get 4 hours of weekly programming on regular cable because remember, it goes to Netflix. So now you can get SmackDown on the USA Network, you can get NXT on the CW Network, but you're not going to get Monday Night Raw after January on any type of cable box. You're going to have to go get a Netflix subscription and go and get it. Maybe what he's thinking is, look, there's still an audience. I know it sounds crazy, but there's still an audience out there that doesn't have Netflix. There's still an audience out there that maybe has Netflix, but they share multiple, like in the household, there's multiple people who watch it. And there's going to be a fight now to go watch Raw live or however they're going to do it. And there could be a wrestling audience that is clamoring to get back to just the normalcy of the television or the cable. And then with Mercedes, if it's on Fox on a Friday night after football season and you're flipping through a channel, you see this woman that you remember seeing on your TV every Friday night, you might stop and say, ooh, oh, that's where what's this? So there's a lot of intelligence there if they can get the Fox deal. I could make the case that unless they get a really good deal for this, and they probably will, maybe less is more for AEW, because one of my biggest criticisms has been that they have too much programming. Like I remember they used to have that YouTube show. They had these matches. Like I couldn't keep up. Like it was just content overload. But I think, you get $75 million a year for 2 hours of original programming or 1 hour a week of original programming. So right now they're doing 185 million for 4 hours. So, okay. So let's say Fox comes to them and says, we'll give you 35 million a year for this 1 hour. You got to have to take the deal. It's more money. You'll be profitable, even more profitable. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But I just wanted to point out that if you're going to, as a wrestling fan, criticize a television deal, it's the WWE CW deal is what where CW fleeced them. Now, maybe at the time CW didn't think they would, but they have effectively. If NXT keeps this trend, they fleeced them. So yeah, that's kind of, I think we covered it.
Yeah, well, just real quick though, I agree with you. I don't think they should take any deal. In fact, if they're going to be on like a lesser cable station just to do Friday programming, I would stay away from it. I think the money is less of a factor than the exposure. The Fox thing being on a channel that more people get, I think is more important for them than the money. And damn, if they do it, she better show up with blue hair on the first episode just for fun.
She should show up with blue hair, and she should show up. And I hope that they let her go back to being kind of a character that on WWE TV during the Fox era, I can make the case was the best work of her career and the hottest she's ever been as a talent. Yeah.
Yep. All right. So, that covers that, but all in all, it's great. The business continues to move forward, and we're going to continue to mark off the victories of women getting paid. So, real quick, we mentioned it through that commentary, but Rhea did sign an extension. It has not hit the news wire saying that she's now the highest paid woman. It hasn't leaked in the same way that Mercedes' deal did. We don't know if she's making more than Mercedes or not, but we do know that it was a significant raise, significantly more money than what she was making. And whether she's making more money than Mercedes or not is probably a matter of where the dollars land. Maybe she's got a higher base than Mercedes does. Mercedes obviously has more IP money availability to her and all that. Really, frankly, doesn't matter. What is really probably cool about Rhea is we do know that it is in that upper echelon of talent being paid. She's probably in the same range as some of the second tier top men is the guess that I saw out there. not quite a Roman or a Seth Rollins or Cody, but maybe I saw KO as a range that was thrown out there. I don't know how accurate that would be. His deal was signed several years ago. I think he's coming up as a free agent. But either way, really the highest money that a woman is signed for in WWE, pretty safe to say that.
I would say that. I think
Yeah.
if Rhea Ripley got less than Seth Rollins, she has a bad agent. That's just my opinion. No, I'm serious. Like, I know people are gonna chuckle at this. Like, if you go and look at Rhea Ripley's merchandise numbers, that alone, if I'm her agent, I'm at the bargaining table. I'm like, listen, other than Roman Reigns, Jimmy Uso, or Jey Uso, sorry, Cody Rhodes, and CM Punk, nobody's touching Rhea Ripley in WWE for merch sales. Liv Morgan has now raised her profile. And so maybe Liv is the next person when her deal's up. She's like, hey, I'm in that range too. Look, I'm not disparaging anybody here, but the numbers are the numbers. You know, Bianca Belair and Rhea Ripley, we've talked about this on this show, are basically the two pillars of the women's division. They are the two faces now of the WWE from a women's side. Bianca Belair doesn't sniff the merchandise sales that Rhea Ripley does. She's not even close. So in that one area, Rhea Ripley can go to the bargaining table and say, yeah, other than these four men, I am your top merch seller. And at times I've beaten them. This is where the numbers starts. And Rollins is not one of the four men I mentioned. Now, Rollins maybe does, there could be some negotiation that he's had, maybe some favored nations. I don't know. But like, I think Rhea Ripley should be one of the top 5 paid performers in WWE. I don't know where she should be in, like, she's not going to be number one. And I know I don't count The Rock, everybody, because The Rock is in his own stratosphere of what he makes. I'm talking about active performers. Reigns, Punk, Cody, Jey Uso. That's it. Who should make more money than Rhea Ripley? Because and the Jey Uso, I mean, I feel like there should be a podcast done on the Jey Uso phenomenon because nobody saw this coming. But back to Rhea Ripley, she was the leader of a male group. She was top merch seller. She gets the crowd reaction. She's main evented pay-per-views. She absolutely should be one of the top 5 paid performers in WWE. And quite frankly, she should be the highest paid woman performer in WWE because of her age, because of what she brings to the table. Now, if she isn't, or she might be for now, and then Becky comes in, and then Liv comes in, and Bianca comes in, that's great for the industry. But yeah,
that's what we want.
Yeah, that's what we want. But yeah, like I did see that number. Oh, she should be in the Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, Gunther kind of range. And I'm thinking, no, like she should be well above that. And it's not the whole thing that wrestling has always done is underpaid women and overpaid men, right? Like that's just the fact. But Rhea Ripley, you know, take gender out of it. She has enough bargaining power to come to the table and say, hey, look, I should get all this money. And it really comes down to her agent, you know, doing it. Now, while Billy, you and I are talking about options, and what's great about this AEW TV deal is that there is an option for a performer to go somewhere else and make the money, like what Mercedes did. Most of the WWE talent don't leave now because they love the environment so much, and they love Triple H's booking, and they love Shawn Michaels' booking, and they love the atmosphere, and they love how hot the product is, and they have that fear of, I call it the Kurt Angle fear. And for those of you who don't know the story, I'll tell it. And actually, not to go into too much detail, Kurt Angle told me this story in person in a Planet Fitness I don't know if it was Planet Fitness, but it was a fitness gym in Rockford, Illinois. But he told me this story face to face, which is the one thing he missed about being a WWE performer when this was in his peak TNA run. Nobody thought he still wrestled. They were like, oh, I thought you retired. No, I'm in TNA. Oh, what's that? Like he would go through airports and people would ask him, are you retired? And there could be a fear of that from some of these WWE performers that they don't want to now, instead of wrestling in front of 2 million people a week on TV and 10,000 people, they're wrestling in front of 800,000 people on TV and 2,000 people in an arena. They don't want to do that. So that could be also part of the negotiations.
Well, they're all human. It's no different. Everyone listening to this has a job that they either like or they don't like. And if you like it and someone were to offer you more money to leave, it's harder to leave if you like the job because you like your job. If you don't like your job, it's pretty easy to leave, right? So the more comfort people have in a Triple H run locker room or run company with, you know, I think a less drama-filled locker room than WWE had in years past, right? Just more focused on the work. Yeah, it's going to be easier to keep your free agents, just like it's easier to keep your free agents on a winning football team. They might even sign for a little bit less. However, I hope that anyone who is agenting one of the top women out there, women are paid less than the men per what they bring to the table. And it is very important. And again, I'm going to give Mercedes her flowers over and over and over again. It took a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage. And the move doesn't just impact herself. And I would hope that an agent for Rhea Ripley or Bianca Belair play hardball, because that's what's necessary to move the numbers up. When Becky Lynch became the top paid woman in professional wrestling history, when she was on her run as the man, it's out there. I'm not going to disparage any men, but if you guys want to Google it, go look at the pay in 2019 and 2020. They basically said, hey, you're great. Here's your number. And she had to take it. She probably should have gotten the number 3 or 4 number, and she got like the number 12 number. And some of the men ahead of her were not someone who was making any impact on the business in a good way. And some of the men tied with her are guys that couldn't even make TV, and I'll leave it at that. There were some guys tied with her that hadn't wrestled on a pay-per-view in years, right? So I'm never going to say the men should make less money, but we need the women making more money. Because no one's overpaid in this industry, as we've talked on a bunch of times. So
the men and women should make as much money as they can make, but the top women's performers need to be paid like top performers, not
correct.
top women performers. That's
Correct.
the distinction.
Yep. So speaking of Rhea, she was on multiple shows this week. We're starting to get like that old Survivor Series crossover. I'm not a huge fan. Obviously, we wouldn't have had the Becky Lynch moment with Nia Jax punching her lights out without, brand warfare, however you want to call it. They're not labeling it like that now, obviously. And it's not related to Survivor Series. It's related to the Saudi Arabia show. But generally, it messes up the cohesion of storylines. I at least thought they did a somewhat good job of, like, obviously Liv and Rhea are not dropping their feud to be on the same team or anything like that. So a good start, but generally storylines get paused or messy or lost during this month of programming. But what did you think of the start of that this week with the crossover and Liv and Rhea being on SmackDown?
So I think, okay, so if I'm not mistaken, on Raw, there was no Nia Tiffany crossover, right? That hasn't happened yet. That will be taped. It was taped, so we'll see it this week. Correct? Okay.
Yes.
So then when I watched SmackDown, I liked that they were doing the Nia Tiffany thing in the ring. Nia alluded to it like, hey, Tiffany, I'm going to beat the crap out of Liv and I'm going to lay her out at Crown Jewel. And this is your time to cash in on her. And then as soon as that happened, Liv comes out, Dom comes out, and Raquel comes out and they kind of say, "Oh, we're gonna sit and watch you face Naomi at ringside." So they're kind of, they're kind of planting the seeds for multiple things. Which is the dominant woman champ, and then who is Tiffany going to cash in on, which is good. But again, this is a big criticism you have had for a while, and it's a criticism that I thought it was exclusive maybe to you and a small audience, and now I'm seeing it's a very big audience, is they're tired of Dom being a part of everything Liv does. So
Yeah.
even though Liv goes to SmackDown and is getting into Nia's face, Dom is there. Dom is part of the story still. He's her boyfriend, but he's showing up. Raquel is showing up. And then even now, Rhea is showing up. What does Rhea have to do with this? Because it's Liv against Nia at Crown Jewel. It really should be Rhea going after just Raquel. But again, you asked me my thoughts. I think you can make the case that in a very short time, the idea that I did say, which was Raquel is going to be the person who comes into this, has been booked very weak already.
Got
Like,
flattened.
yeah, like Rhea's music comes out, everybody gets scared. Rhea beats up Raquel in 4 seconds. Dom and Liv run away. She gets Liv. She beats Liv up. Oh, and by the way, just for fodder, she beats up Nia too. And like when I watched SmackDown this week, I thought it was Rhea Ripley here as a woman competitor, and everybody else was here.
Yeah.
And if that's what they're trying to do, then it was very effective. But then I don't want to see a Raquel match with Rhea. I have no interest. What's the point?
Yeah. So I wanted to let you go first because you are the Rhea champion on
Yes.
this podcast, and you're not wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong. It just hasn't worked as well for me over the years. And I do think that the sentiment, like you said, that I had, kind of just didn't love Dom being so involved. I was a huge Liv Morgan fan for a long time. Not that I'm not now, but they've made her less compelling for me as a fan. And Rhea, it's a little bit Charlotte Flair. It's a little bit like, all right, like we get it, like she can't ever look bad for too long. It's hurt Charlotte. We've talked about it. Vince had this thing where the minute Charlotte had to do anything negative, he cleaned it up for her within 7 days almost every time. She either won a brawl or won a match against someone else or won the belt back, for crying out loud. I mean, it was always like she loses and then make Charlotte look strong. You could say Roman Reigns too, right? Like that was argument against Roman Reigns for a long time, is make Roman look strong. It's delayering Rhea, right? There's no vulnerability there. What's the point of Raquel even being around if she can't hold Rhea off one time, right? And I'm not even saying get over Rhea. I'm saying Rhea comes out and Raquel and Rhea just brawl. All Raquel needs to do is hold her own, not be a door that just gets kicked in, and then they brawl to the back. And then Rhea's around lurking, but Raquel can at least, do her job the one time. So and then making Nia look bad, it just doesn't work for me because Nia's been booked about as strongly and as well as you can. And even when they have someone else look good, like Bayley, they protected Bayley in that Bad Blood match, right? She still had to throw the kitchen sink at Nia to basically should have beat her. It wasn't like she just, was going to beat her off of a random thing. I mean, she threw everything she had at her, and that's what it was going to take. So yeah, just not a fan of that. What I will pivot to that I did like, they're putting some of that complexity and layering in what will happen next with Naomi. Loved seeing her, beat Nia. And again, Nia's been booked strong enough that she can handle that. I just don't like the non-champion from the other show being the one to flatten her too, right? Like, think about that. It's not even the champion from the other show. It's the non-champion from the other show.
Yeah.
So it actually even devalues Naomi's big win a little bit to probably some viewers, but
Somebody needs to help me here. I think I have the answer, but maybe you know this. Is the last time Rhea Ripley has been pinned clean? No interference, no Dom. Liv Morgan on that Raw episode when they broke up as a tag team and Liv pinned her. And then the subsequent feud, the subsequent match, Rhea beat her and injured her. I think that might be the last, because and if I'm not mistaken, Liv Morgan in back-to-back weeks pinned Rhea Ripley, and she was still in the company then. That's how long ago this was, Sasha Banks. Like, I remember there was like a back-to-back week where she pinned Rhea and she pinned Sasha, or maybe it was after that. But I cannot remember Rhea Ripley taking a clean loss since the Liv Morgan match, maybe 2.5 years ago. And if that's the case, now we're getting into a territory of, wow, she's Roman Reigns, right? Like, pinning her clean is a special feat. I think the one thing they did do well, you talked about Naomi, is how Naomi got her win, which is they beat up Tiffany on the outside. They took the briefcase. Liv hit Nia with the briefcase, assisting Naomi. Why that's good is it's foreshadowing. So that's how Nia is going to lose the title. It's going to be because of the briefcase.
Right.
And it's a blonde woman who hit her with the briefcase. That is also the foreshadowing, I think, which is good. But yeah, I didn't realize that so many people on my timeline just hated how dominant Rhea looked. Like, they just didn't like it. They're like, what is the point of having a heavy in Raquel if she gets discarded in 8 seconds? And Raquel is actually physically, in some cases, more imposing than Rhea. But she didn't look it. She just got literally, here, get lost. And I know people love that version of the Rhea Ripley character. So you talk about layers, you talk about the depth of character. From also what I read on the timeline is they want machine Rhea Ripley, who just kills everybody. So if that's what you want, they are giving it to you. They gave it to you Friday night. But I don't know. I mean, I guess to me, does Rhea just have to win the title and then just become like a Gunther type of champion where she just beats opponent after opponent after opponent and has these different feuds? Because what do you do with her? Like, she didn't even lose to Liv at the last pay-per-view. She won the match. So yeah.
Yeah. Before we move over to I think we got to talk tag team and WWE and some AEW stuff, but just my thing on it, and maybe it's a personal taste thing. I tend to like, I'm not necessarily a work rate guy, but Sasha Banks, Mercedes Moné, Macho Man, Bret Hart. Maybe I don't like my champions to be too dominant. Actually, this, I think Roman got a bad rap when he was a face, big dog Roman Reigns. I didn't see him as an overly dominant champion. Everyone looked at it that way, but that man sold his ass off and put on a lot of really, really great matches and would give a positive rub to a lot of guys on the roster. I mean, people forget, had several great matches with Finn Balor, and he sold death for that
and
guy.
Lost to Finn Balor, yeah.
Yeah. Buddy Murphy, that SmackDown match was one of Roman's. I mean, Buddy Murphy had no standing to be in there having Roman Reigns dropping on his head for him. And Roman went in there and sold him like he was in a life or death battle with his mortal enemy. I mean, that was a great match. And I like wrestling that has, selling and story throughout the match. And Rhea does a great job of that. Rhea sells her butt off. And that version of her that's willing to sell her butt off, like when she was in there with Becky and Charlotte and during the Survivor Series match with Sasha, right? So she's got it in there. So I'm not a Terminator mode Rhea guy. I'm not a Terminator mode anyone guy. Even Gunther generally has a great struggle with most of his major matches, even though he's going to win. It's so I think obviously it wasn't during a match, but her just mowing through several women that they've built up over the last year. And especially Raquel, first day back on TV, needed to look somewhat viable, and it just didn't happen. Is someone from WWE listening to us about Bianca and Jade? I don't suppose they are. Our audience is not that big, but we are getting quite our share of storylines right, and or feels like we're being heard a little bit, right? Because they are using Jade and Bianca to push superstardom on multiple shows, all 3 shows, and has really raised the level of prestige of those belts because of it. And you got multiple women on multiple shows want the belts now. It's really, really probably the best the division's been in a while. So it feels good to see them doing that. I wish they got more time as hosts of Bad Blood. But what are your thoughts on what they've been doing with Jade and Bianca?
It's exactly what we talked about, and it's exactly what it should be done. They are 2 larger than life characters on TV, superstars. They have a presence, they have a look, they have an aura, all the words that are thrown around on the timeline. And to me, this is the best use of that team, which is they are the traveling rock show. They come to your city, you want to see them, you want to be in their presence. And if you're a local, and I'm going to use this term, like if you're a local act, Jakara Jackson, Lash Legend, you want to get in the ring with them for the rub because it's only going to elevate your profile. The same thing with the Unholy Union. The same thing now. You see the feud simmering with Chelsea and Piper. Clearly, there's going to be possibly a Bianca Jade versus Roxanne and Cora match. And, who knows? I mean, we could get the dream tag match. We can get we can get Stephanie and Julia against Bianca and Jade too. Like, they've taken the tag belts and the original intention of the women's tag belts, which is they can go to any show, they can show up at any time, and they can fight, your top team in that territory. So let's say Raw is a territory, SmackDown's a territory, NXT is a territory. We can come to your territory and fight your best team and go to the next territory the next night and fight their team and just keep this act going. It is absolutely the best use of Bianca and Jade as a team because I don't think they're ready yet to be broken up. I think there's just way too much meat on this bone to talk about a Bianca Jade feud. I think that's down the road. And right now, all the women who are benefiting from them is great. Because on this week's TV, you got Lash Legend, Jakara Jackson, Chelsea Piper, all on camera with Bianca and Jade. On Raw, you saw they had that 10-woman tag match setting up possibly one of the teams coming out of that, fights Bianca and Jade. You also, this Monday night, they've already promoted it as the big rematch with Kyrie and Io. I don't remember the first match, but okay. I guess they're talking about the triple threat. But in for those, I'm not going to spoil it. There is a spoiler out there on who won that match because it already was taped because they're in England this week. I love what they're doing with Bianca and Jade. I could make a case that Bianca and Jade are booked better to my liking than Liv is as the face of the number one brand of WWE. I
100%.
think Bianca and Jade are booked better, as tag team champions. So I love it. I love what they're doing.
Well more compelling in ring than Liv has gotten the chance to be. And that's nothing against Liv. It's not, I'm sure she didn't choose to have a title reign where she rarely wrestles and defends the belt. We've already talked about that ad nauseum, but we'd like to see her in there. Even just as a, move on from just a Monday Night Raw defense or something like that, just to remind people that title is something that people are vying for. But Bianca and Jade, I think they've done an amazing job. I love the way they're being booked. There's no rush because they're getting women a lot of TV time, as you noted. The only thing that this title reign needs is I really, really, really want them to develop a B-side that can keep momentum and or catapult the titles into mattering for a match. And what I mean for that is I want them to have a feud that naturally progresses where it, at the very minimum, main events a Raw or SmackDown or prominently featured on a pay-per-view, which only 5 matches make a pay-per-view, but like really, really prominently, video package, all that stuff. One of the great things about the Golden Role Model run is that Nia and Shayna became this amazing tag team, and we got some great matches out of that. Now, their title run was not booked properly after the fact, but I do hope that we get this great B-side out of the Bianca Jade run. And they've got plenty of time. I mean, that's not even anything that has to come around for the next couple months. They could just, again, be that fabulous road show that they've been for the time being.
And look, we have the B-side because we touched on it a little bit, and I'll pivot right there. Another prediction, I don't want to pat myself on the back, that I did effectively call is I said, Cora would help Roxanne retain the title against Julia, and that Julia's help would actually be Stephanie Vacour, and it was. It actually played out exactly as I said it would, which was Julia's like, I got my old friend who I have a history with, and it's Stephanie. And oh my goodness, it happened. And Stephanie unexpectedly showed up on NXT to help Julia. And I thought of all the 4, Roxanne was magnificent in that segment because the look on her face when she saw Stephanie's name in the lights and like, oh no,
right,
these two are coming. Uh-oh, we got to run. That was perfect. And then the amazing storytelling, Shawn Michaels, kudos, is the NXT women's title is on the ground and Stephanie and Julia pick it up together.
Right.
And so now it's like, are they going after each other eventually? Are they going to fight Roxanne? But I think that's the team. I know a lot of people who listen to our podcast, whether it's on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, RSS, they're not going to like this selection by me. I think Stephanie and Julia should be the ones to beat Bianca and Jade. And you know why everybody's going to say that? Because they're going to say they get everything. They're already going to be probably the women's title feud at some point. Now they get the tag belts and they get to beat the dominant team. Yes, because I could make the case that Stephanie and Julia being that traveling team, they could do the exact job Bianca and Jade do after they beat Bianca and Jade, because they were the 2 hottest women free agents in wrestling other than Mercedes, going to a Raw, going to a SmackDown, and the style that those 2 women wrestle, I think it could elevate the women's division in a different area. And that's it. Yeah.
It would be, no, I think if that was a plan for them, that would be fantastic. It's just a matter of if one of them is going to be obviously next in line for NXT Women's Champion would be the other. How long do they want to keep the belt on Roxanne, right?
Yeah, and you could do that. Yeah.
All right, so we got about 10 minutes, and we've waited this long to talk about Mercedes. Actually had a match this week. I have a rant. We gave Tony props for about the first 40 minutes of this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why you signed the greatest women's wrestler of all time. Treat her like the greatest women's wrestler of all time in media and in booking. And on your Wednesday show, treat her like someone who you're not so sure belongs on your weekly show. And I'm just going to say it. I'm so sick of getting an 8-minute match 17 minutes past the hour of hour 2. She's the only person who defended her belt on Title Tuesday, and they didn't make that important at all. Don't call it Title Tuesday then, okay? I'm fine she didn't main event. They're in Washington. Danielson's going to main event. No problem. Darby Allin and Brody open up the show. A promo. Like, why wouldn't you open up the show with Mercedes and Emmy? I don't get it. So I'm going to say that that match was very, very good and then ended abruptly. It was going at a pace where you're like, oh, this is going to be a great match. And then, like women's wrestling has happened to it in both programs, the finish comes way quicker than it should based on the story. And you realize that the women were told that they had a shortened amount of time. So they couldn't tell. I mean, an 8-minute match. And then just the slot on the show in between this and in between that, and very little given to the fact that it was the only title being defended. And so when we talk about Tony needing to focus on his product and elevating it to get ratings up and to get attendance up now that he has a deal, again, I'll start with how you pay the greatest women's wrestler of all time more than any woman's ever made, pay her more than most of your men, but it's almost like he's protecting men's ego. The only thing that can be said is it's like he's protecting some of the male egos, that he won't make her more important on TV. He makes her more important at every press conference because she is. But if you're not telling your TV viewer that she's more important, at some point she won't be more important. And I'm gonna pass it to you with this.
Yeah.
She's fighting Queen Aminata this week. There is no excuse for it not to be the main event of the show. Zero.
I have a question about that match. Are they back on Wednesdays this week? Or are they on Tuesdays?
Yes, they're back on Wednesday.
They're back. Okay. So you talk about protecting male ego. I don't think that's what it is. I would like it to be that simple. I think he's protecting the history of what he knows as wrestling booking. Okay? Like, this is Tony Khan is a lifelong fan. He's a Dirt Sheet subscriber. He's a in the weeds fan. He grew up in the South. He's a big NWA guy, right? Well, how does NWA book? They've always, like, the women weren't even on that show. Like, they didn't even have women's matches. So I feel like he's always going to think that the men's title is more important, and he's always going to book the men's matches as more important. Now, do I think he thinks the men individually are more important than Mercedes? I actually don't. I think everything he does in his press conferences and in his videos and his conference calls, he says, Mercedes is my A+ star. But when you watch the television product, she does not come across to me the way he presents her as the A+ star. Right? And that's because he just books wrestling a certain way. And he has to get out of his own way and allow the women to main event multiple pay-per-views. And it doesn't have to be Mercedes. It could be Mariah May versus Jamie Hayter. I don't know. But I'm saying he has to break the seal off his own lock that the women are placed in prominence with the men. A lock and a seal that clearly, whether you love Shawn Michaels or you love Triple H's booking, they have broken that seal, and there is no more, oh, Rhea Ripley's main eventing on a show with Roman Reigns. I couldn't believe. Yes, it can happen. You know, Rhea Ripley can main event. Bianca Belair can main event. Nia Jax can main event, Naomi can main event, and you don't worry about it on WWE TV. It's not history making anymore. It's an occurrence that is frequent. He has to get to that place with his television where I saw somebody. I wish I knew your Twitter handle. He's somebody who listens to the show. He says, I think his name is Leon. He says, Tony, it's been 7 months since Mercedes has been in your company. She has not main evented one show. For all the Leon. For all the criticism of WWE, Mercedes main evented a lot on WWE programming, right? Like of how they booked her. She main evented a lot in her history there. NXT, main roster. So I think Tony has to get out of his own way. And here's the thing. The same way I didn't like how, as the Mercedes Ime match was getting good, they cut it and she won. It's the same criticism I have on SmackDown of what they did with the women's tag title match, which was you had this debuting team of Lash legend Jakara Jackson's their first ever appearance on SmackDown. And Kevin Owens interrupted their entrance to say, I know Kevin Owens is suspended, so he snuck into the arena, securities didn't do their job. And he's saying, hey, I want you, Cody. And it completely took the attention away from them. And then when security escorted him out, we come back to the ring. As Jakara and Lash were really getting cooking with their team moves, Bianca hot tags Jade comes in, they win. It's over. The match was like 4 minutes.
Right.
So I didn't like that either. Like I thought what they did with Mercedes wasn't great, and I hated what they did with the tag title match because I felt like Lash and Jakara were really showing me something, and I was getting into that match. I'm like, it's over? That's it? I hated that too.
And I hope that that's why y'all like listening to. We're gonna call it out on either side. We're not beholden to any preferred organization. When WWE messes up and Kevin Owens coming out during the women's segment, I wish Kevin, I'll call it. I wish Kevin said, I don't want to do this during debuting women. And they're only going to get 5 minutes and I'm going to take up time in the ring. Give me another segment to come out during. Real quick back to Tony. I understand that he sees wrestling being booked a certain way. And if that's it, then someone needs to get in his ear and tell him that he's got to do better. But my anger comes from this trifecta of we get a match with your highest paid woman that was not built nor referenced on television beforehand. In fact, Emmy basically did most of the work building the match, talking about some stories of meeting Mercedes in Japan on Twitter. But the trifecta of no build, bad placement, it was not the right time to main event. Bryan Danielson's got a main event. Mm-hmm. It should have opened. It was a title match on Title Tuesday. It should have opened. And then the most egregious, why I say is he protecting egos or whatever it is, 8 minutes with a commercial. You have the greatest North American women's wrestler of all time, who you paid like the greatest North American women's wrestler of all time, facing a woman who's a legend in Japan, is nearing the end of her career, and has been wrestling for over 30 years, right? Well over 30 years.
Mm-hmm. Almost 30 years, yeah.
Yeah, 30 years, sorry, yeah, since she was 18. And they get 8 minutes. It's like it doesn't make any sense, and that's about the last strike I have on that. So that's why I'm calling it out. He's got a great, well-wanted match this week. Queen Aminata, Mercedes Moné. There are two things that if he falls short of is unacceptable, and I'm going to call it out on this right now. He needs to open the show with it or close the show with it, and he needs to tell us ahead of time. You're trying to drive viewership. The Mercedes Moné Queen Aminata match is going to main event, or we're kicking off the show. He does it for the men all the time. All right, let's tell women's wrestling fans when this amazing match is going to happen. And number two, I mean, if it's anything less than 12 minutes is the minimum. It should be 15 to 20. But 12 minutes is like the bare scrap minimum that this match should go. You've got one of your up-and-comers, a hard hitter. This is going to be a really, really good match. And this is going to be a great way to sell your women's division. He needs to put some effort into it. Announcing it Saturday was a good start. Let's see what he does. But I'm really looking for him to put some real promotional effort into this match.
For every praise I've given Tony for what he's done with a startup company, the revenue he's generated, the TV deals, another place, another alternative for people to make money, which is great. If I'm just being honest, as a wrestling booker, I don't like how he books TV. I don't. And I think it goes back to what you said, which is I don't know if he's like he has this weird the women can only get this much time. I don't know if he has that working within his own brain, but I just feel like he tries to cram too much into 2 hours. And I think that's part of this problem.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it was a really good week. I'm glad we got a chance to cover the TV stuff. I think that this upcoming week is gonna be it's gonna be good because we have a tag team title match on Raw.
Yeah.
We're going to have a dream kind of match, Mercedes and Queen. And shout out to Shazizzle. He's one of our listeners. He said, the Queen, Mercedes knows how to make magic with queens in San Jose. That's a reference to
great line,
the landmark NXT match that Charlotte and Sasha Banks had in San Jose, WrestleMania 31 weekend, that actually opened Vince McMahon's eyes to women's wrestling and that it can actually do business.
I will state here and now, and I will state it in public over and over and over again. If anyone who has any pull with WWE ever comes across this clip, I would pay easily $100 for video footage of that match. Upload that to YouTube or wherever, and at $100 entry fee, I'm in just for that match immediately. In. I need to see it. It's what's the Bret Hart? Was it Bret Hart, Tom McGee or something?
Tom McGee, yeah.
That's this famous tape, right?
Holy Grail.
Holy Grail tape that was traded back in the day. Because if you watch this one match, you would have thought Tom McGee was the next, Hulk Hogan or Ultimate Warrior. And Vince was convinced, and that's a whole other story. But Charlotte, Sasha Banks, San Jose is the #1 match in the history of my life that I have not seen video of that I would pay a lot of money to see.
So I don't know if you know this or not. Maybe you've seen it already. There is a security cam footage of that match.
I have. I want to see that.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't like I hated watching it through the security cam because I'm not going to mention the name of the podcast, but there is a Observer podcast that the two hosts actually attended that show, saw that match live, and sat right behind Vince McMahon and Triple H, right? They were invited, funny, you think who's in bed with who, but these two, and everybody knows what I'm talking about, were invited by Triple H. They sat behind Triple H and Vince, and they all watched this match together and saw the interaction between Triple H and Vince saying, this should be my women's match at WrestleMania next year because of how good they performed in the ring that night. And they stole the show, outperformed Owens and Zayn. That's the match that you're referencing. And I don't know how of all the matches and all the video WWE has, how that match hasn't had its own documentary, because it really should have its own documentary, like how Sasha Bailey NXT has its own documentary, or the women's triple threat. Like it should at Mania have its own story behind it because they absolutely stole the show that night.
And you know what? More pitch to WWE personnel. That documentary would do more for Charlotte than it would for Mercedes.
Yeah.
Mercedes is already she's already to the wrestling fan that would consume that documentary, she's got the lore right here.
Yep.
As a fan, we just want to see it. I think that's a great legacy builder for Charlotte, because that's one of the things you can point to say not everything was handed to her.
Yeah.
She was here at the ground level. And real quick, I don't believe everything was handed to Charlotte, but you have that fan out there that she's Ric Flair's daughter. They've used it on TV plenty of times, and the amount of title reigns they've hurt her with, you have that sentiment. She was there at the ground floor, and she was part of one of the first matches that really convinced main WWE to roll with them as a WrestleMania, act. And she's just as deserving, of being a pioneer in that evolution as Sasha and Bailey are. So yeah, I'd fork over a lot of money. So hopefully Mercedes can recreate some magic again here in San Jose. Yeah, good week at TV. What's lined up for SmackDown?
Maybe I've heard rumblings that it could be Nia versus Rhea, but would they do that on a random SmackDown? I've heard,
Unless they're trying to pop a rating or something, I don't know, but
so we'll see. But I think it's going to be a good week. I think we covered a lot of ground this week.
Yep.
And again, I'm saying this as an Eagles fan because I need it to happen. I need your Lions to win today. I need them to beat the Cowboys.
I am not an overly confident, or I'm a Lions fan. I don't get overconfident about anything, but we should push them around the field today. They're very injured as well. We're a better team healthy, but they're also injured. I expect that if we show up the way we're supposed to, a little bit of extra anger from getting screwed over in Dallas last year, I believe we should push them around the field today. I hope.
All right. So good luck, and we will talk to everybody next week.
All right. Thanks, everyone.